They need to find where it is. Suddenly, something thuds there, and they see the light ahead. Sees that light, Yui runs away and says look. She sees the light. Then, pointing forward, she raises her voice, saying let's go over there. As she stepped ahead to move, Chin grabbed her shoulder and stopped her. There, she turned her head, asking him what, and he put his index finger on his mouth and asked her to keep quiet. Then he pointed aside, and both of them hiding behind the rock slightly moved ahead to look and see the dragon monster-like thing there. She gets scared and puts her hand on her mouth, asking what in the world are those things. However, Chin answers he has seen countless numbers of monsters before, but this is the first time he has found something like this. Some monsters resemble humans, but they only have a few similar features. These things look like an amalgam of a human and a beast, and he has never seen such disgusting creatures in his entire life. They both hide behind the big rock, and the monster stands on the other side of them, sniffing then looking up, raising its voice, saying he smells human flesh. Hearing this, both Yui and Chin get scared, and Chin hears the monster's voice and thinks, did the monster talk? It didn't sound like Korean, but he recognized that language from somewhere. After this, the monster turns with its pointed legs and glances all around to check if there is any human while both of them hide behind the big rock. After studying there, the monster turns from there and returns to his place. Sees this, Yui turns her head and looks toward Chin without anything. Chin nods his head, and then they both wish and move ahead to run away, but as soon as they carry, a huge monster stands before them. Looking toward them, the monster asks where they are. Sees the beast there. Both of them start to sweat, and then the beast strikes its pointed leg to attack them. However, the monster strikes and crashes the big rock where they both stand, and a dust explosion occurs there. Moreover, they both fall away. Chin sits up there, but Yui turns around and falls back. Then Chin gets up and takes out his weapon from the belt. Chin starts twirling his weapon while Yui stands behind him, using her magic to get her inventory there. However, the monster gets out of that dust explosion while Chin stands there holding his weapon, looking toward the beast. Chin thinks it's fast. Further, he stares at the monster's body, feeling those surgical scars and the stitches. He is sure of it now. This is not a natural monster in this field. The monster was quite big, and they both stood there holding their weapons. Chin turns his head, asking Yui how much mana she has left. She stands behind him, holding her magic stick, and replies she has enough to cast about 4 or 5 spells. Chin jumps toward the monster, replaying her that should be enough, then sees Chin coming toward him. The monster stays silent and doesn't move. Chin, with his red eyes, tries to stab his weapon into the monster's body. The weapon clangs with its body, and a bright light emerges there. As the light fades, Chin, holding his stuck weapon with the monster's body, sits on its leg while the monster laughs, asking him what he thinks he is doing. Sees this, Chin gets surprised, considering it impossible his sword couldn't cut through. The monster strikes its pointed leg to attack him. Meanwhile, the Yui magic tentacle spurts out of the ground and crumbles the monster's leg. Chin pulls back his weapon, which is stuck to the monster's body, and jumps backward. Then he screeched on the ground and thanked Yui for her magic. She smiles, answering don't mention it. The monster cracks Yui's magic tentacles and sees this. Chin stands there thinking this horrible abomination isn't the only one they need to worry about. Then he looks aside, thinking that there are 2 more of them, but they seem to be preoccupied with their conversation for now. Further, he clenched his teeth, thinking this battle would become quite difficult if these 2 joined in. They need to finish this quickly before that happens. Then he turns his head and calls Yui's name. She attentively looks toward her. He asked her if she would be able to buff him with her remaining mana, and she nodded. After this, she starts creating her magic, and a bright flash of light emerges from the stick's head. Then she lifts her stick ahead, saying haste fire the sword and enhance strength. However, Dex Max, Star Max, and Fire attribute magic activate in Chin's body, and the fire gathers around him. His eyes turn red, and he stands there pointing his sword toward the monster, thinking his body is overwhelming with power, and then his legs start to pulse with magic. Then he jumped, twirling his weapon, and sliced the monster's leg and arms. Seeing this, the beast was surprised, turned his head, and looked toward him angrily. Chin stands there in the air, stares at the beast move toward him, flying, and slices the monster's body, and the blood spurts out of its body. Sees this, Yui smiles, thinking all right as she would expect from Chin. He is known as the strongest PvP fighter after all, as Chin keeps attacking the monster with the weapon and slicing it into pieces. Therefore, with the new buffs, Chin was able to cut down the monster that he couldn't hurt before. However, he started to notice that something was wrong. The color of the amalgam's blood was crimson red, as Chin had slain countless monsters in his life. But he had never seen a humanoid monster shed red blood. Once he realized this, Chin couldn't help but wonder if the he was cutting down was a monster at all. However, the monster's leg is thudded, and he crashes on the ground dead and sees Chin smile while something is panting behind him. Yui was surprised to see how Chin had killed that monster. Then, putting a hand on her mouth, she surprisingly asked if it was over. She didn't want to jinx it. Meanwhile, the other two monsters get there. And see those monsters, Yui raises her voice calling Chin. He turns his eyes and sees the monster at his back. He gets shocked. However, the beast crashed its pointed leg to attack him. But as the beast crashed its legs on the ground cracked from that area, and the dust and smoke spread there. As soon as the dust smoke ends, the monster is surprised to see two of them are gone. One of the monsters looks around, saying he is gone. But as the monster turns, both Chin and Yui stand behind them. Seeing this, the monster asks sneakily, "Aren't they little rats?" However, both of them get scared then. Chin stands ahead of her and asks her how much mana she has left. Miss Yui, hearing this, makes a sad face and remains silent. Then she answered she used most of it for the buffs just now, so she only has enough for 1 and 2 spells. Hearing this, Chin, looking toward the monster, clenches his teeth and takes out his weapon from the belt, thinking he has to do this, and then he clenches the handle of his sword. He runs toward the monster to attack them, thinking he needs to finish those two before the buff runs out. On the other side, Kim crashed the wall before him, and the dust smoke spread there, and from that dust smoke he came out. Standing out of the dust smoke, he gets the notification window of warning, and then another window appears before him, telling him that his ally has engaged in another battle. However, the map before him, which he sees the distance between him and the two of them, Kim stands there in the cave and asks the system how long it will take to reach them. A window appears before him. The shortest route will take approximately 30 minutes on foot. He hears this and shakes his head, saying that's way too long. The system replies it is impossible to fly inside the dungeon due to its cavernous nature. Hearing this, Kim remains silent. Then he asks, but it should be fine as long as he doesn't fly there, right? Then, within a second, he activates his physical enhancement skill, and the bright, wavy light starts emerging out of his body. Further, a bright light spreads there, and Kim flies from there. He flies so fast that he crashes every rock and wall in his way. On Chin's side, he jumps to attack the monster, but the monster creates a magic shield barrier before him, and Chin clangs with the barrier and falls away. Chin gets slightly injured and screeches on the ground by stabbing his sword into the ground. Yui stands behind him, using her lightning magic to create light all around Chin. Also, her mana is about to end. Moreover, both of them stand there holding their weapon step, ping backward while the monsters are stepping toward them. Kim was heading toward them, crashing everything in his path, and the window appeared before him, indicating that the estimated time left for his arrival was 1 minute. However, Chin moves ahead to attack the monster, but the monster cracks the wall and falls him away, rolling. Chin got up, and with the help of Yui's remaining mana, he attacked the monster with his twirling sword and sliced its leg and arm. The blood spurts out of the monster's body, and the beast shouts. While Chin keeps attacking the monster by twirling his sword, the other monster, his companion, gets there from behind and strikes its arm to attack Chin. Sees this. Yui, with her magic stick, attacks the monster with her lightning magic, while Chin is fighting with the other monster. Moreover, the monster crashes Yui's lightning magic, strikes its leg on Chin, and falls him away. Chin screeches his sword into the ground with the help of his sword, and he stands there. While Yui points her stick toward the monster, says Chin, this is taking her back, and he stands ahead of her, clenching the handle of his sword, and replies yes, of course. But they might want to hold off on the pep talk until they finish this. Meanwhile, a bunch of monsters surround them, and one of the monsters cracks the wall and gets out of it, saying Chin is stronger than the rest of the humans that have entered this place. But nobody has ever walked out of there alive after finding them. Then the monster squirmed, saying that the implant gave them a new life as immortal as the further evolution of humanity. Hearing this, Chin clenched his teeth, thinking, what is this thing talking about? Then the monster throbs, saying, "Behold the overwhelming power of humanity's next form." Suddenly, the monster stood there, started to split, and started absorbing the dead monster. Also, the other monster there and becomes a huge monster sees this. Both Yui and Chin get gloop, and Yui looks up toward that huge monster and, surprisingly, asks what on earth it is absorbing the dead monster. However, the monster stands there before them, and they both look tiny before the beast. Chin, looking toward the monster, asks for a three-way fusion. He has got to be kidding him, and Yui stands behind him, wide opening her mouth in surprise, and adds her point, saying she is getting sick of this. Further looking up toward that huge monster, she thinks they barely have any mana and energy left anymore. This is the worst it can get. The monster steps toward them and sees Chin clench his teeth, thinking it's almost as if they are facing all three of them again. He grips and grasps the handle of his sword, considering that both of them have survived this far alongside the other first generation. As Yui was fearfully looking toward the monster, Chin stood ahead of her, call her name. She asked what, and he saw the sword handle. Answering, he knows that this is difficult for her, but he needs her to gather the rest of her mana. Then he twirls his sword and buffs him one last time. He hears this Yui node answering she has just enough mana for one more attack, but she will use that to give him 3 buffs instead, but they will only be 1/3 as effective. However, Yui returned her haste fire sword and enhanced strength mana to him, and the bright lights spread around him. Chin stands there twirling his sword, thinking, now, let's show this monster the true strength of the first generation. Considering this, he jumps toward the monster, twirling his swords. Meanwhile, the wall there starts rumbling, and Yui stands there and looks up, thinking the rumbling is beginning to get louder. However, the wall crashed and Kim, surrounded by the lighting power, came out of that wall. Flying, he attacked the monster from behind while the beast was stepping toward Chin. Kim punched the monster, crashed it, and sliced its body part. Then, a huge light explosion occurred, and then smoke spread. Both Chin and Yui stand there looking toward the explosion, and from that explosion, the sound of crumble and thud happens. After this, Kim appears from that dust smoke, saying he is glad to see that both of them are okay. Seeing Kim there, both of them sigh. However, 3 of them stand there before the monster, and the window appears before Kim that the energy of another day's tones has been detected. Hearing this, he turns his head and looks toward the daystone in the air behind him, and surprisingly asks for another daystone beside this one. The system replies he is unable to identify the organism. The energy of the daystone is coming from an unknown organism. Meanwhile, the monster there squirms, sees this Yui stands beside the monster, and says the pieces of the corpses are still moving even after that decisive blow. Chin held the sword handle to take it out from the belt, answering her to let him finish it off. As he stepped ahead toward the monster, Kim stopped him, saying, "No, wait, hold on." Then he asks the system if he can absorb the Daystone's energy system and replies it is faint and small, but he can absorb the energy, which will result in the organism's death. Kim orders the system to do it. The system starts to absorb the monster's power and stone from its body while absorbing the stone. The system tells Kim that commencing absorption is a bit gross, but there he gets to slurp. However, a flashlight spreads over the monster's body, and both Chin and Yui put their hands over their eyes while Kim stands there, closes their eyes, and that flashlight surrounds him. Moreover, the flashlight starts emerging out of Kim's body, and the window appears before him. The Daystone's energy has been successfully absorbed. The quantity is insufficient to enable a new feature, but it could be enough if he lets him drink the one that he is holding. Here's this. Kim stands there with closed eyes, thinking he feels like it is starting to express itself more. Meanwhile, the monster and its body begin to disappear. From its body, the smoke comes out, and both Chin and Yui step toward the monster. After this, another window appears before Kim, and the system informs him that he has detected the energy of the boss and another day-tone fragment behind the wall next to his player. Hears this, Kim silently looks up toward the window, and then Yui stands there and says she is glad that's over, but they still haven't found the boss Moth Queen yet. Further, she says that they can only leave the dungeon if they defeat the boss. Hears this, Kim steps ahead and crashes the wall before him. However, the wall crumbled, and dust and smoke spread there. Sees this, both get surprised. Yui sticks out her tongue and smiles, asking why he is destroying the wall again. Chin remains silent and doesn't respond. Kim moves ahead and sees this. Chin says let's follow him, and she stands behind him and replies okay, and then they both run after Kim. However, 3 of them arrive at the place where the boss monster is. They see the boss monster, Chin flinch, and both of them are surprised while Kim keeps stepping ahead. Also, the boss monster needed to be in better condition. Its hand, neck, and legs were tied with 7 lightning spell circles, and it was lying on the ground injured. Therefore, the window appears before him. He detects a corrupted fragment of the dristone within the boss in front of him. Hearing this, Kim asks what the boss of this dungeon is. It looks like it's already about to die. The system replies, absorbing the boss's daystone will kill the monster and complete the dungeon run. However, the boss monster is lying there, and the system tells Kim the beast is currently incapacitated and appears to be begging him to take its life. Hearing this, Kim remains silent. After this, Kim asks the system if he can read the monster's emotions. The system replies he is capable of understanding its basic emotions. He senses its anger and sorrow as well as its fear and despair. Hearing this, Kim thinks the monsters are capable of feeling human emotions, and this one is asking him to end his own life. However, Kim was one of many who found the situation to be strange. The Moth Queen was supposed to be the final boss of the Moth Chamber. But this mysterious dungeon was infested with these unknown creatures, and the Moth Queen was bound to a magic spell circle with a fatal injury. Further, the rank hunters had already completed several moth chambers before, so these circumstances were more than enough to convince them that something was amiss. After this, Chin moves toward the spell light, which bonds the monster's arm, and Yui touches the spell circle to check it. As soon as she touched it, the circle spelled light stuck to her hand, and the bright, wavy light started coming out of her hand. After this, Yui gets up, saying this magic circle is a restraining spell, but a magic circle of this size is a challenging thing to cast. Whoever pulled this off must have had an A rank no, an S rank set of skills. Hearing this, Chin stands aside and adds his point, saying that the wounds of these monsters are unusual as well. Normally, the injuries from a battle should be crude and irregular. Then, looking toward the injured monster, he says, but the cuts of this monster are far too orderly and clean. It's almost as if someone had cut up this monster to take away the organs they needed. Hearing this, Yui Grit says yes. She agrees he probably has come to the same conclusion as her. But if her deductions are correct, someone must have artificially created this dungeon. However, Chin, staring at the monster, adds his point, saying this is hard to believe even with all the evidence. Then he asks if someone has been experimenting with the beast as they both are talking while Kim stands there silently looking down. Moreover, Kim stands there thinking that this is only partially implausible. After all, the government of South Korea has already been experimenting with the fire dragon's remains. They should all get out of there before anything else happens to them, and then Kim steps ahead toward the monster. Stands there near the monster, Kim asks the system to absorb the Daystone energy. System replies, commencing absorption. Then the shining stone starts coming out of the monster's chest. Sees this, Yui's mouth wide open in surprise, and she surprisingly says it's the same thing as earlier. Chin stands there, stares that shining stone, asking what that shining fragment is. However, the glowing stone turns into a bright light while the roaring sound comes from the monster's mouth. Then that flash of light spreads around there, and it starts circulating Kim while he stands there silently closed eyes. A window appears there, the Daystone energy has been absorbed, and then the monster crumbles and its body starts to disappear, and only the smoke remains there. However, the monster disappeared, and the smoke that was coming from his body ended, while the 3 of them stood there in the spell circle. After this, the dark aura emerged before them, and Chin was silently staring at Kim. As Chin was staring, he and Kim looked aside, saying let's hold off on any more questions for now and leave the dungeon while it's completed. Yui points ahead and adds her point, saying he is right. Let's get out of there, they can talk outside. Chin angrily looks toward her and remains silent. Then he turns his head toward Kim, answering all right, let's go. After this, 3 of them move ahead toward the dungeon exit shield door, and then 3 of them exit and the dark aura spreads there on the spell circle ends. As soon as the 3 of them come out, sunlight hits their eyes, and they put their hands on their eyes. The window appears there, informing Kim of deactivated night vision. It had only been a minute since they had been there. Meanwhile, the military soldiers surrounded them, holding their weapons. However, one of the soldiers raises his voice, saying they have found them, sir, and the other soldier stands beside him, saying they sent in a report immediately. As the soldiers were talking to each other, three of them surprisingly stood there looking toward the soldier. However, Yui looks around and asks what is going on. Meanwhile, Yoon gets there from an aside, calling Kim, Yui and Chin names. Three of them turn their head to look toward her, and Kim surprisingly asks what Lieutenant Yoon is. After some time, Yoon tells them they return after 2 months, and hears this three of them surprisingly ask what 2 months. And she sighs, answering yes, it's already been 2 months since the three of them entered the dungeon. Hearing this, Yui shakes her hand, saying that it's impossible. It should only take about 3 days to complete the moth chamber. While Kim stands behind her, she asks the system if it has been 2 months. The system answers, calibrating the difference in time he has spent 71 hours inside the dungeon. Then another window appeared, and the system said that while wanting 441 hours had passed on Earth, the local time had been adjusted. Hearing this, Kim was surprised. He pressed his lips, thinking there was another fluctuation in time just like the one he experienced in the tutorial. After this, Yoon says they have reported their return to the Prime Minister, so she should be coming to see them very soon. But for now, let's all head back to the lab. Yui replied okay, and then the four of them moved from there to the lab. They all walked forward, and Kim followed behind. Yoon turns her head and looks toward Kim, and in response, Kim nods. The four of them then go to the military base lab. However, four of them sit on the chair while Yoon is reading the file lying on the table. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Gu slams the door and enters. Four of them turn their head and look toward the door. Gu Sent is there smiling, saying they are all right. However, Seongryong Gu and Yoon watched Yui's recording of everything that had transpired inside the dungeon. Gu, holding Yui's recording camera, was watching the recording, and Yoon, standing beside her, was also watching this. After this, Gu looks toward Yui, and Chin sits there and thanks them for their work. She says she will contact them both very soon, so go and get some rest for now. Hearing this, both of them get up from the chairs and move toward the exit door. As they are stepping toward the door, Gu calls Yui, and she turns her head, asking what. Gu, folding the recording camera, answers she will back the recording once they delete all of the confidential information. Yui smiled, nodding, and answered understood. Then they both left, and only Gu, Yoon and Kim were in the office. Kim gets up from the chair, takes the dristone from his backside, and extends his hand toward Gu, giving her the dristone, saying he has retrieved it. Gu takes the dazed stone from Kim and slightly smiles, appreciating the good work, Captain Kim. Further, she says she honestly can't fathom the boundaries of his capability. It almost seems as if he is breaking through the limits every time Kim scratches and looks down, answering no, it was nothing, madam. Hearing this, she looked toward him, saying that sometimes he doesn't seem so different from anyone else. Then she stared at the stone, saying that with this day stone in their hand, humanity would be one step closer to bringing an end to this crisis. Kim bent his head, answering yes, madam, and then she smiled. After this, he moved toward the exit door. As he stepped ahead, Gu stood behind him, looked toward him, saying some people were waiting for him outside. However, the exit door of the lab creaks its shutter up, and Kim moves toward outside, surprisingly thinking people are waiting for him. As soon as he stepped outside the military base, he was surprised to see his team members there. Also, their appearance had changed. They had become stronger than before, and their muscles had grown, and their feet were swallowed. Also, their clothes were torn apart, and their eyes were turned red. As they all stood there, Kang stood ahead of them with folded arms. Kim, looking toward them surprisingly, asked what happened to them. The window that updates character information appears before him. Every one of these members has awakened as a player. However, the error window appears, and then another window appears, revising character information with updated information. Hearing this, Kim remains silent and surprisingly asks what, and the system replies a new unknown power has been detected. Generating a new category of power includes HWI Kang and the rest of the team members. Hears this, Kim surprisingly asks why they have the same power as Kang, and then Kim's subordinates raise their voice, congratulating Kim on his safe return and saluting him. They all salute Kim while Kang's folded arm stands ahead of them, and then Kim lifts his arm, saying all right at ease. Further, Kim says they all handled the situation while he was gone. Good work. Hearing this, Kang cheered up loudly, saying yes, Kim praised him. They all stand behind him, surprisingly looking toward him. After this, Kang jumps there happily, and while jumping he moves ahead. And they all stand behind and look toward him. As he goes on, Kim asks the vice captain what went on while he was away and what happened to all of them. Vice captain answers a lot of things have happened to them in the last 2 months, Captain Kim. Then he explains 2 months ago, on the first day of Kim's mission in the dungeon, a dungeon break in the city, and Kang, in his absence, kills all the monsters alone with his magic power. Also, military tanks and troops were there to handle that situation, and Lieutenant Lee was surprised to see Kang alone killing the monster. Then, surprisingly, he says he never expected another man like Kim to exist. This kid is incredible, and Vice Captain says he was surprised to see this all. He already knew that the rookie was strong, but seeing him like this makes him realize just how powerful he is. If Captain Kim hadn't saved him back, then he might have ended up like these monsters. However, Vice Captain Juwon Ham was in awe of HWI Kang's power and even realized he was safe under his protection. But a sense of frustration began to rise in him and stands there silently looking down. He trembled and clenched his fist, thinking he could be sitting uselessly like this forever. He wanted to become as powerful as him. Moreover, Kang kills the monster himself alone, and the military soldiers collect the monster's corpse pieces, and they are carried away on stretchers. Further, the vice captain tells Kim as Kang kills all the monsters, he and his team members move toward Kang, who sits there on the road. While on the way, the guy with orange hair asks him if it would even be possible none of them are players, and even if there was a way, he doubts he would tell them about it. The vice captain replies that they can only rely on the captain and the rookie for a while. Also, even if it isn't possible, they have nothing to lose by doing this. Further, they are the ones who are desperate to hear this, the guy with orange hair fearfully says, but he is just worried that the rookie might have some grudges against him, vice captain. Hearing this, the vice captain remains silent and after a minute answers don't worry about it. He will take care of everything. However, they all move toward Kang, who is sitting on the road and stands behind him. He calls Kang, says him. Rookie Kang turns him, asking what the matter is. Then, the vice captain and his team members explain everything to Kang. They all stand before each other on one side, Kang, and before him, the vice captain with his subordinates. Hearing this all from Vice Captain, Kang asks if he wants him to teach them about his power, and the Vice Captain answers yes. If he could lead them to use that power and become stronger like him, they could gladly accept him as their instructor. Hears this, Kang grins and then asks them if they want to become stronger, and they all get surprised and remain silent. Then Kang says no problem. However, the next day, Kang took them to the forest. There, he told them they had to run away from the destination where he had done his training. He ran away from there, and they all ran after him. After running a mile, the vice captain and his team members got extremely tired, and then they all stopped there on the way to catch their breath. Vice captain, with puffy breath, asks Rook how much longer they have to. Kang, with a smiling face, answers they are almost there now, and then they keep stepping after her. However, after some time, they arrive at the place where Kang used to do his training, which has mountains and rocks and a sparkling stream of waterfall. Kang stands ahead of them, looking toward the mountain and waterfalls there while they stand behind him. One of the team members fearfully looked up toward the mountain with a sweaty face, asking, so this is the orange-haired guy looking up fearfully at the training ground of their rookie. Further, the vice captain looks up and asks himself what this place looks like. It's from a historical movie and something. Then he looks toward Kang, stands ahead of them, and says don't tell him that they are going to train. But he is meditating under that waterfall. Then he asks and lives off the land. Kang answered yes, that's what they are doing, then asked the vice captain how he knew, and the vice captain sweated, asking if that's actually what they are doing. Kang presses his lips, answering yes, and then the vice captain steps ahead, removes his jacket, and plops it on the ground. Sees this, his team members get surprised, and the vice captain, with full enthusiasm, says alright, he looks forward to his guidance, Kang. However, Kang starts the training that day, and in this training he teaches them martial arts, throwing punches, standing under the waterfall, tree climbing and hanging upside down, mountain climbing, rope abseiling, weightlifting, animal fighting, etc. Moreover, at night time when they sit down tired, they hunt the animals in the forest and roast them on fire and eat them, and after having their meal they all sleep there in the forest on the ground. Then next day they start their training from where they left off yesterday. Kang teams them to use his magic on rocks. Their training lasted for 2 months in such a way that a small stem of a plant grows out of the ground. They trained every day and each member showed progress. Their rigorous training continued for 2 months in such a way that the small stem of a plant grew out of the ground and slowly became a plant. However, they all become strong just like that small stem that slowly becomes a plant in 2 months. Hearing this all, Kim says the vice captain, so that's what they have been doing for the past 2 months. Then vice captain calls Kim and also requests him to counter them to have his back from now on. Kim remained silent, and then he tapped his hand on the vice captain's shoulder and smiled. From now on he has always trusted him to have his back. Hearing this, they all get emotional, and with teary eyes they sniff, and then they lift him saying they will follow him to the better end. While Kim asks them alright he gets it, can they let go of him? Kang stands in the distance watching them, then he rubs his nose smiling. However, Kim's 2-month absence was enough to reinforce his team's power level and their sense of comradeship. Further, Kim's team members celebrating their happiness throw him up in the air, while Kang stands in the distance folded arms backside was watching them. On the other side, in an office in the dark, a man with purple eyes wrapping himself in black clothes was staring at the paper on which Yui, Chin and Kim's picture and their bio data were mentioned. As the paper was lying before him on the table, he picked them up and arranged them. Meanwhile, the door knocks and he gets an alert saying come in. The door creaks and 3 people enter, and they also wear black clocks. Stands there in the dark in the office while the purple-eyed man sits there before them on his chair holding the pages, then looking toward he asks a regretful turn of events, isn't it a black eyes witch? Then the 3 who stood in the middle answered the incident was unexpected, but he could still fix this. Then the purple-eyed man put the information pages on the table and tapped it answering yes, it could still be fixed. Further, he says, and it must be hearing this, the lady in the middle wearing a cloak and mask answers, she will personally make her way to South Korea. Hearing this, the purple-eyed man remains silent. However, in Seoul City at the D. Hansen intersection of Natal Park Road, the military was transporting the remains of a fire dragon. 2 military soldiers were in the truck, one of them was driving, while the other one was sitting in the seat next to the driving seat. The chopper escort informs the convoy that they will head out to the outer road after passing through Point A. Over. Hearing this, the soldier while driving the truck taps the wireless phone on the side and passes through the rest of the trucks honking the horn. While the other soldier sitting next to him was dozing leaning against the seat. Sees him dozing, the one who was driving angrily looks toward him asking him to stop dozing off. Transporting the fire dragon's carcass is a serious mission. Now that hears this, the soldier wakes scared and remains silent. Then he yawned answering right sorry, he doesn't know why he is feeling so tired today, but now that the Shield Guild is gone. Then he sighed saying he doubted anyone would try to steal this thing in their country. Heard this, the other one asked does he took the remains of the 8-star boss as a joke. Even the world's most influential countries want a piece of this thing, it makes perfect sense for them to guard it like this. Hears this, the soldier looking out of the window sighs and remains silent also. On the road military jeeps, trucks and helicopters were passing over there. Their truck was the first on the road, all the other jeeps and trucks were behind, and from the chopper escort the pilot informed them truck 1, they were about to enter a tunnel. Try to get through it as fast as they can. Hears this, the military driver answers by bringing the wireless phone near to his mouth understanding they will try to pass it as quickly as possible. Then he turns his head and looks toward his companion. He is snoring. Sees this, he clenches his teeth asking fine, get some sleep then. As the truck was the first on the road, also the chopper escort was following them. The truck entered the tunnel and it cracked the wall and crumbled it. However, the chopper escort informed them there was an emergency. He repeated they had an emergency, while the military driver got scared and panicked drive. Also the one who was snoring woke up. The military driver looks behind through the truck mirror toward the cracked tunnel rocks, and the chopper escort informs truck 1 to exit the tunnel as fast as possible. However, the truck moves to the other side of the cracked tunnel, and the stones are scattered everywhere on the road. The military soldiers get out of the jeeps and gather there holding their weapons, and the chopper escort informs them the rest of the units will take a detour. Hears this, the soldier answers while driving Roger that they will be out of there soon. Sees that situation, the one sitting beside the driver says he has heard that there have been more tunnel and bridge accidents since the fate opened. Then he fearfully asked why did it have to happen at a time like this. The driver turned his head to look and was listening to him. As they were talking, the one who sat beside the driver pointed ahead and raised his voice, informing the driver in front of them to stop. The driver pressed the brake and screeched the truck, and they were hardly saved from the accident. As they stopped the truck, they were surprised to see another truck standing there ahead of them on the road. As the driver broke the truck, the other one, putting his hand on his head, asked why they had another truck in front of them, and why is there a truck in the tunnel that looked just like theirs. The driver clunks, answering something's wrong there. Then both of them with the guns get out of the truck to check. Both of them point their guns toward that truck and move ahead. One of them extends his hand to unlock the truck door and says his companion covers for him in case anything happens. The other one stands behind, pointing his gun toward the truck. Answer, all right. As soon as they try to open the door, someone puts a gun in front of his eyes and sees this, his eyes wide open in fear. However, the door opened and the men wearing army costumes got out of the truck, shooting them. They killed both of them while some bullets clang with the truck, and their blood also splattered on the truck's front side. The soldier thudded on the ground, rolling, and the hijackers were 3 in number. After shooting the soldier, 3 of them moved ahead. One of them stepped on the military soldier's chest. The hijacker covered their faces with masks, and one of them stared at the truck. Also, there was a red mark on his face, and he had one gray eye. They stepped toward the truck. As soon as they enter, the soldier's wireless phone radio lying there rings, and there is a call from the chopper escort. They were asking truck number 1 how much longer would take to exit the tunnel. The one with a red face mark grabbed the phone and put it near his mouth, answering, they had roughly 2 minutes until their exit, sir. However, the chopper escort was flying up in the air and arriving at the other side of the tunnel to check, and there the same truck with truck number 1 was on the road. Sees this, the pilot informs truck number 1 has exited the tunnel. Truck 1 keeps following the original route. The remaining units will join them after their detour. Hearing this, the guy with the red mark on his face holding the wireless phone answers, Roger. Then he stares at the phone and looks toward his companion. Nod also responds. His companion nods. Then his companion put all the boxes in the truck that was cracked with the bullets from the front side, and then they all sit in that truck and move from the tunnel to their destination. However, the hijacker dropped the original truck out of the tunnel. At the same time, Prime Minister Gu was attending the conference outside the hall. A lot of people gathered there. Some of them were people working in big companies, and most of them were media and press people who were asking her questions and taking pictures of her. People were very excited to see her there, many of them slogging for her, and among those people a lady, while slogging, expressed her love for Gu, and Gu humbly thanked her. After this, Gu's subordinate stands behind her and informs her that her next appointment is with the party leader at the National Assembly, and Gu stands a head nod. Then they stepped ahead of them to move from there, while Gu's subordinate, holding the paper file in her hand, informed her, and after that, she had a dinner schedule at the Blue House. As Gu was stepping ahead, media people and the citizen were clicking her pictures and slogging for her. While walking, she stops there on the walking area side, and she feels that something is happening behind her back. Also, the people gathering around her become status. Sees this, she turns her head to look. As soon as she turns her head, she clenches her teeth, asking herself, if it can't be, are they under a charm spell right now? However, the people all around her became status, and their eyes turned red, and a charm spell circle was created all around where those were stands. She turns her head and looks around, thinking it takes a lot of mana to cast a charming spell, even on a single target. So the fact that this was cast on an entire crowd means this was done by a master sorcerer. However, she was looking around. Meanwhile, a lady wearing a clock appeared near her, sees her standing before her. Gu grit, saying, of course. This could only be done by someone of hers power level, the guild master of the Shield Guild, Urim Park. After this, Urim asks Gu why did she wants to get rid of them that badly. Here's this. Gu answers their guild was simply punished for their crimes, and in response Urim smirks, asking about their crime. Then she removes the clack from her body and creates the spell, asking then does she plans on punishing her as well. Gu, staring at her powerful body and muscles, answers, of course, a violator of the law will face punishment no matter who they are. Urim gets near Gu and looks into her eyes, smiles, asking, is that so? She is still as hard-headed as she has ever been. Gu stands there and Urim passes by her, saying all right, then punches her all she wants. If she can, she will be looking forward to it, and she has always wanted to fight her Prime Minister Gu. Here's this. Gu turns her head and raises her voice, calling Urim's name. Meanwhile, Urim disappears with her charm spell and people around there become normal. As Gu stands ahead of them, her subordinate, and the people around there surprisingly look around, and one of Gu's subordinates asks her, "Is there something wrong, Prime Minister?" Gu grits and turns her head slightly, saying to cancel all of her appointments and summon the National Security Council immediately. On the other side, in the forest side, monster corpses were lying there. Kim and his subordinate go to check that situation. As Kim and Kang stand there silently exploring the situation, while Kim's other subordinate steps ahead to check, Vice Captain hits the monster's skull lying in the way with his foot and falls it away. Kim's subordinates were checking around while Kim stood there with folded arms exploring the situation, saying they had gone through a change. Further, he says this was only a low-rank dungeon, but they should be able to handle a dungeon break without him now. Then he appreciates Kang for his hard work on his subordinate, and in response, Kang rubs his nose and smiles. Meanwhile, one of Kim's team member call his name from behind. Kim turns his head to look, and his team member, holding the wireless phone in hand, informs him he has been summoned to the joint headquarters of the Third Army. Hears this, Kim asks what's going on, and he answers the Fire Dragon's remains have been stolen by an unknown organization. Hears this, Kim remains silent. However, in a small nameless building in the suburbs of Seoul, Prime Minister Gu with her subordinates was through an elevator to arrive at the secret floor. The elevator door opens. Gu clank there with her subordinates and scans the entrance card to enter the meeting room there. Moreover, at the basement of this establishment, the high executives of South Korea, including the general of the Third Army, the government official of National Defense and Security, and Captain Kim of the Special Dungeon Control Team had gathered for an unofficial national security summit. The door opens and Gu with her subordinates enters. Seeing her there, everyone there gets up from their chairs and salutes Prime Minister Gu. However, Gu in response asks them all to take their seat, and the topics of this gathering were the theft of the Fire Dragon's remains by a known group and the illegal entry of the Shield Guild's guild master into South Korea. After this, Gu sat on the chair, and one of the directors of national intelligence stood with a rostrum to start his presentation with the projector. A video is shown on the projector in which a group of people wearing cloaks exit the airport and take a turn to the side from there. Also, the people in the airport become status due to the charm spell. The director zooms the video to show them those groups of people, but they are unable to see their faces because of the veils wrapped around them. Then the video ends and the captain points toward the projector to inform them. This is where the video ends. He says the guildmaster's charming spell was so powerful that they had to check the airport's security cameras to detect her arrival. Hears this, Prime Minister Gu raises her voice, saying, "Director of National Intelligence, this means that there is a break in their national security." Then she raised her voice, asking how the people trust and rely on them in this situation, and he apologized to Gu. While everyone else sits their head down and Gu grits, thinking she has gotten even stronger. Yaram Park has always been skilled in magic, but she couldn't charm an entire airport like this before. Then she asked the captain sitting before her, as he had been tracking down the stolen remains of the Fire Dragon. He nervously answers they have been trying to analyze the security camera on the roads, but many of them have already been located and destroyed by the culprit, and it won't be easy for them to track them down. Hears this, Gu clench his teeth and get up them. She slams her hand on the table and shouting at the captain, asking for security cameras is not the only resource this county has. There are plenty of automobiles with dash cams. Everyone has a camera on their smartphone, and stops making excuses for themselves. Hearing this, the captain fearfully gets up from the chair and heads down, apologizing to Gu. Then she sighed and scratched her head, saying this was terrible, and then the director of national intelligence added his point, saying the retrieval of the Fire Dragon's remains should be their priority, madam. If this gets taken out of the country, then the consequences will be unimaginable. However, this was correct. The Fire Dragon's remains held astronomical values. No amount of money could ever match its worth, since no other country and group has ever officially cleared an 8-star dungeon before. After this, Gu sits at the table and calls Kim's name. Kim in response answers, "Yes, madam." Sees this, everyone there makes a jealous face and pouts. Then Prime Minister Gu tells Kim he is to pursue the Shield Guild's guild master. Hears this, the general and army captain get up. One of them raises his voice, asking them what will they do about the Fire Dragon's remains. The culprits are undoubtedly a group of rogue players. Then the other general stands beside him, saying they could ask the other guilds for cooperation, but they need to be able to handle the situation on their own. However, the Prime Minister answered them she knew that they had no other choice and Captain Kim was only one person. Here's this. The general and army people their grit. Then Prime Minister Gu adds her point, saying he can't take care of two situations on his own. After this, the general asks them what will they do about the fire dragon's remains, and Gu answers that is why she specifically designated Captain Kim for this mission. Captain Kim will go after the guild master with the National Intelligence Agency, while the rest of the Special Dungeon Control Team track down the fire dragon remains with the military. Further, she says to keep this in mind, these incidents are first-class national security emergencies that they need to solve independently without the assistance of any other guild. Here's this. One of the directors of National Intelligence asks if will Captain Kim be taking on the mission by himself. Then he says this is the Shield Guild's leader they are talking about. Fighting the guild master on his own could be as he was about to complete his sentence. Gu adds her point, answering that is why she has called another person to help him. Hearing this, the military general and the officer of national intelligence murmur with each other. After this, Prime Minister Gu clicks the phone button saying come in. However, the door opens and a lady agent Ju Ae Gu enters, sees her. The military generals, national intelligence people, and the director are surprised and stare at her. Ju Ae steps ahead and stands before Kim, saying to him, "It is a pleasure to meet him." Kim sits there silently looking toward her, and she stands before him slightly smiling, saying she is Ju Ae Gu from the 1st Division of the National Counterintelligence Agency. However, the National Intelligence Director shouted, asking Prime Minister Agent Gu was tasked with an important in Israel, how could she bring her there without any notice? Gu closed her eyes, answering her apologies, but the matter was just too urgent. One of the intelligence officers asked if this was truly the right decision. Assigning an ordinary agent to a mission like this could hinder Captain Kim's performance. Further, he asks if wouldn't it be better to have a player accompany him and drive the special dungeon control team into groups. However, Gu remains silent, and then the intelligence officer says allow him to explain. Then he explains, asking does the name Tamer rings a bell to anyone there, then says during the Battle of Seongnam several citizens could not be rescued by the first generation. But they were all transported to safety without any casualties by the hero famously known as Tamer. It was later found out that Tamer was only an 18-year-old girl, and after the dungeon break the government recognized her potential, and specially appointed her as an agent of the National Intelligence Agency. 10 years have passed since that incident, but Tamer is still actively serving the country as the greatest veteran in the National Intelligence Agency. However, she now goes by her given name Agent Ju Ae Kim. Hearing this, the general answered yes, he remembered her now. She was the field commander of Seongnam back then. She would always disappear whenever he tried to thank her. So Agent Gu is the Tamer, and they have no complaint. Then seeing that they have come to a mutual agreement. Here's this, all Gu smiles, asking let's start discussing the actual plan, shall they? After this, in the briefing room, Kim explains to Kang everything that they discussed in the secret room. Hears this, and Kang jumps, asking why he can't join him again. Kim answered they didn't have a choice, and he was counting on him to take care of everything. Here's this, Kang presses his lower lip and bursts into tears, and then turns his head and pout. While Kim is looking behind him, their agent is coming toward them. However, Agent Gu steps toward Kim, calling her name. Kim asks what happened, and she replies she has been looking for him. As both agents Gu and Kim stand before each other, while Kang stands in between them with folding arms and pouting. After this, Agent Gu looks toward Kang and asks, and this is Kang turns his head and looks toward her. They both look into each other's eyes, and their eyes glow. Kang quickly moves behind Kim and holds him back from his shoulder, while Kim turns his head, asking him what's the matter. This isn't very polite of him. While Kang sitting behind Kim was staring at Agent Gu, then Agent Gu coughed, saying she didn't expect to find a playful child with Captain Kim. Also, Kang was looking to the side behind Kim with his hands on his shoulder and his mouth on his arm. Agent Gu smiled further, saying well, perhaps a child would not be the right term. Here's this, Kang looks toward Agent Gu, surprisingly asks how she knows, and Kim turns his head and looks toward Kang to press his lips. After this, in Area 15, meanwhile, on the prison island, no one has ever escaped the Sin Island. However, the soldier opens the prison door window and sends food inside, saying it's time for his meal for prisoner No 4882. The prisoner quickly pulls the tray of food inside, and the cabin window clangs. The soldier looks through the bar window and clenches his teeth. However, prisoner No 4882 was nobody else but Taram Park, who was eating the food quickly like animals. Sees this, the soldier stands outside and says he sure has a good appetite. Even as a criminal, Harem munches the rice and gulps the whole food. Meanwhile, a group of people wearing the clock moves ahead toward the prison. Also there was raining while Harem finishes the food and clangs the food tray on the ground. A flash of light falls there on the ground where that group of people stands. Sees those suspicious people, the soldiers point their guns toward them asking to halt. Stop right there, who are the people who identify themselves and will open fire. On the other side, Harem burps, and on that group of people's side the lady wearing a clock smiles answering the soldiers they are from the Shield Guild. Hears this, the soldier gets surprised, and then the lady smiles and creates her spell charm saying she is the guild master and she has come to find her little brother. However, the siren starts ringing in the prison, and the soldiers raise their voices to stop them. Then more soldiers gather there and start shooting the culprit. While Harem creates the spell charm shield before her and her companions, the bullets clang on the shield and fall to the ground, while the soldiers keep shooting and stepping toward them. On the other side, Harem created the spell charm with her hand and the whole prison caught fire, while the soldiers stood before got scared and sweaty, asking how they even made it there, then raised their voice informing the military base everyone had to pass dozens of checkpoints to reach the Sin Island. Further, Harem created the spell charm smile saying well she is sure it depends on who the visitor is. Then with her index finger she created the circle spell charm where the soldier standing holding the gun. Sees that circle, the solider gets scared while Harem gives an evil smile saying now she needs all of them small fries to leave the stage. However, they make a fist of her hand with her spell charm and throw the flame storm toward them. They all burnt and thud on the ground away. The flame ends and the whole ground cracks where she created the spell charm. Also, the smoke emerges from the ground and Harem with her subordinates moves ahead toward the prison where Harem his brother is locked. However, they enter the corridor and pass by the prisons there. She touches the iron bars with her hand and crashes it. The dust and smoke spread there, and she with her subordinate enter ahead. But as soon as they enter, they find the player and stand there. One of the players looking toward Harem there says he can't believe she would go this far. Harem with an evil smile and red eyes answers step aside. If they don't want to die, she will spare their life if they decide to back down. Hears this, the player laughs, and then Harem with her subordinates steps ahead toward them. However, the soldiers cluck their guns, and one of the players wearing glasses raised his voice, saying they fully expected her arrival and reinforced their defenses, as she can already tell her charm magic is nullified in this place, and they even prepared their new battle drones, the Jai 389. Even a grand sorcerer like her shouldn't be able to charm a machine. Hears this, Harem laughs and creates her spell shield around her there. Then she smiled asking if he was done with his boring speech, and the player with the orange clothes angrily pointed his finger toward her. However, the drones clunk and move toward Harem to defeat her spell magic, and while sending drones toward them the player raises his voice that's enough to bluff the guildmaster to surrender immediately. While Harem stands there loudly